Welcome to Industry Capabilities Series, a joint initiative between SKG Consulting Services and CIC Careers Group. I'm Khushbu Gupta, founder and director of SKG Consulting Services, and I'm joined by Sameer Mathur, founder and director for Careers in Care. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Kush. Hi, my name is Sameer Mathur, and I am the CEO of Careers and Care Group. We help RTOs in designing and implementing risk assessment frameworks to identify systemic and operational risk proactively. Now, it's a very interesting topic, Kush, as you rightly mentioned, because, most of the industry consultation, the conversations are primarily around, whether it has been done or not. But we have to look beyond it. We have to look at what was done and how it was done, and also the kind of engagement that the RTOs actually have with the industry, because that is the essence of vocational training. So, yeah, let's get into it.
No, definitely, Sam. And I think another layer to it is what impact does exactly the consultation have on the actual training happening on the ground, and what impact does it have on the training and assessment side of things? I think that's a very crucial shift that we need to discuss as part of today's session. So let's actually break down the session into some segments, because I think when it comes to industry consultation, we can keep going and we can keep talking between two of us. But it's important we stick to the key areas that we definitely need to cover as part of this discussion.
Sure.
What exactly makes the consultation auditable, not just documented, in terms of how we can reflect the results of the consultation into the actual practice, the real scenarios where the RTOs get things right or wrong. That is also, I think, very crucial for us to discuss, because there's two sets of RTOs that we see. One who believe that as long as the feedback is gathered and as long as the forms are completed, the consultation part is completed. And the other set of RTOs, I see that they go very deep into it, and it gets a never-ending process for them to gather the meaningful information to reflect it back into the policies. So there's a very fine line that we need to arrive at when we talk about the industry consultation. How the document should be structured to actually serve the system, that's another very important layer, because if you do not have the proper tools and ammunition in your hand, then again, you can go outside the topic. And how the consultation becomes the engine behind the continuous improvement. That, I think, again, is intermingled with how we reflect the outcomes of the industry consultation into practice. So let's start off with what actually has changed and what is happening on the ground.
Sure. Thanks for summing it up, Kush, and so that we are focused on what we really want to discuss today. Yes, let's get into it straight away now, because see, it is very important to look at the consultation from the auditor's perspective, as you rightly mentioned. The consultation, what makes it auditable, is very important. We'll probably look at that, and as you rightly mentioned, there have been significant changes in the way the consultation is expected to be done and what the auditors really are looking for now. So because the expectations around consultation has evolved over a period of time, and that is what we'll focus on. And we see that in the audit findings that we do, internal audits, as well as the audits that ASQA conducts, and the focus of the auditors as to, well, what exactly have you been doing? How have you consulted with industry? Did the consultation bring about any positive changes to your curriculum or assessment practices? So yes, that's very, very important. So yeah, looking at some of the examples of what it looks like from the auditor's perspective. An RTO we worked for had conducted regular industry meetings, quarterly, well-attended meetings. On the file, on the paper, it looks all good. But the problem is when you probe deeper, then you understand that there hasn't been any meaningful changes that has happened as a result of the consultation. So that is what is very, very important and foundational. What do you have to say?
No, definitely, Sam. I think we all go through the similar scenarios. There's consultation that happens. We gather feedback from the industry. There are recommendations to either change the selection of electives or to change the sequence of delivery for the units. But if those documents are just gathered and put in a folder, assuming that the industry consultation exercise is completed over there, that's actually a very bigger mistake. It's better not to do industry consultation, I would say, rather than doing the consultation and not implementing the changes within the training and assessment systems, because then there is an evidence that there's a particular way how the industry wants to see the delivery to happen. And if those changes are actually not embedded into the systems, then we are reflecting that the course is not as per the industry requirements, and we've not taken the feedback in a very amicable manner within the RTO. So there have been instances where industry suggested to have a certain order of delivery for the RTO units, and that wasn't changed because of the timetable issues or whatever the operational gaps are. And then it got picked up in the performance assessment that why was it not considered when clearly the industry wanted you to follow a certain order?
Correct. I mean, see, that is very, very common. We've seen that across the board, sadly, because I think most of the RTOs operating, even the good RTOs, they are so much engrossed in their day-to-day activities that consultation sometimes take a backbench. They do consultation on an annual basis, probably biannually, but then how it is impacting, how it is changing the way the assessments are conducted and how the curriculum is improved is what is failing at some times. Now, see, we'll also look at I believe the problem that has been very eminent, that there's not a lack of consultation, so to speak, but in fact, it's a lack of meaningful engagement to allow for improvement in curriculum design and assessment practices. So the consultation is definitely happening, but it's not happening to the extent to which it should, and also it's not being properly displayed. There's no clear evidence of what has changed and how. So yeah, what do you have to say?
I think I was just thinking about, we also need to take one step back on who exactly do we approach to conduct industry consultation, because that's also is a confusion. Sometimes we get clients asking us that, okay, who are the people we can go consult on a particular qualification if it's an IT qualification. So to determine the proper set of people who can actually be engaged and who can provide feedback on if you are delivering a meaningful qualification, very layman explanation to that would be people who have the capacity to employ the people within that industry with the employment outcomes that you're getting with that qualification. So to break it down further, we have employment outcomes for every qualification. If a person is in a capacity to employ that person in future, that becomes a relevant industry consultant to provide you feedback, because they're sitting in that position who can provide jobs to the learners who are actually in the cycle of developing the skills that are needed by the industry. So they become the best set of people to provide that feedback. And if we go wrong in selecting those people, the whole purpose of gathering the feedback and having all those documents is meaningless. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I mean, that is one of the most important things whom you're consulting is to be looked at. And that selection is very important. You have to clearly define the criteria on the basis of which you select the individuals you want to consult or the industry stakeholders, because that is definitely going to make a difference. You have to talk to the right people to get the right inputs. And
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. In fact, let's move on and we'll talk about what makes consultation auditable.
Yeah.
So if you look at the traceability of what is a meaningful consultation, there are three main components, as we know. Whether number one, yes, the evidence that the consultation took place. Number two, the issues or the inputs that were raised as a result of the consultation, and the actions that were taken or the outcomes achieved as a result of the consultation. So it's more to do with the accountability and the evidence of the impact, I believe. Show me the evidence, not just the activity kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think most of the RTOs, they do at this stage now, after so much buzz on the industry consultation, they have the capability to tick off the first two, that the industry consultation actually occurred and there are documents and evidence to support that. But the major gap that we see is in the third area, where whatever feedback is gathered is not tied back to the actual training and assessment practices. The feedback is not getting embedded into the system and in the operational side of the RTO. What do you think?
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely correct. And in fact, what we recommend is that every consultation interaction that takes place, regardless of the format in which it is happening, the results in the record that captures should clearly state who was consulted, as you rightly mentioned before, in what capacity, what are the topics that were discussed, and on what date, when actually it happened. So it's important to start with and to make sure that you're recording all of these parameters. It's very, very important.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I think, Sam, industry consultation, it actually starts way beyond, the actual document exchange or the idea of having a formal industry consultation process. Because if we look at from an RTO owner's point of view, the moment they think of adding a qualification to scope, they start going and talking out to people. They do gather information. There's a lot of discussion, conversation happening, whether at the industry event or in any industry seminars or any other platform that they meet. So all that is valuable information because that is where the base of developing the qualification would come from, of how they actually want to deliver something, looking at the other RTOs, talking to other RTO owners. So there's a lot of dialogue that is happening behind the scenes even before actual documents get converted into proper industry consultation paperwork. From that point of view, I think it's very important to realize that industry consultation is not just exchanging the feedback form or sitting down together and having a minutes of meeting done at the time of developing the task. It is much before that, and we need to put all of that conversation and dialogue either into a register form or something, because you need to have that trail of how did you arrive at choosing certain kind of electives, because we get clients who come to us and they're very clear on, this is what we want to deliver, this is the duration of the course, this is what we want to do. Obviously, they are getting all that information prior to coming to the consultant as well to start preparing or working on the documents. Have you seen that sort of scenario at your end?
No, you're right. I mean, see, as you rightly mentioned, it begins at a very, very early stage, and that is how it should be. Because for me, I think sustainability is the issue. There is consultation happening, but it's not happening in a sustainable manner. And when we talk about sustainability, it's important to, as you rightly mentioned, it should be traceable. What has happened in the past, what is happening currently, and what is the plan for the future. Because until and unless it's sustainable, it's happening on an ongoing basis, it is not going to bring the changes that the auditors really want to see. And not just the auditors, for the vocational training sector, I would say. It has to be meaningful, because we have to be mindful that the industry engagement is not just an activity, because it has direct impact on the graduate learning outcomes, because that is what it's heading towards. If we've got a meaningful program that we are offering as a vocational training provider, it has a direct impact on the job readiness of the graduates who come out on the other end, the outcomes.
Yes.
So that is foundational. So it has to be transformative, not just consultative.
No,
That's
yeah.
very important.
Definitely, definitely. And I think to add to that, comments like, training and assessment strategy is very descriptive and very useful, and the information is covered, it meets the requirements. All those comments, they are not relevant for the industry consultation exercise that if we really want to make it meaningful. Because the better discussion point or better, and it also goes back to what exactly are you seeking from the industry. Because if you're just asking them, does the TAS meet the requirements of the qualifications? Obviously, a college who's developing the TAS, they know how many co-units, how many electives. They already know that it would meet the requirements of the training package. The point is whether the choice of electives is in line with the expectations of the industry in today's state. Are they meeting the job outcomes, or are they giving job outcomes which are actually desired by the industry people for the future work? So you can ask the same question, but in a different manner, to get more actionable and to get more meaningful data from the industry as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's what you ask is as we discussed earlier, it's very important, and it has to be meaningful, and it has to relate to what the training is going to be like.
Yeah.
And not just asking about whether the qualification is meeting the requirement of the industry, but also getting a bit far ahead to find out whether the the units are relevant or not, whether they are sequenced properly, and what skills do the trainers need in order to deliver that. So it's important to engage in those kind of meaningful discussions with the industry. I believe it's very important. So
Yeah.
moving forward, because as you rightly mentioned, Kush, we can just keep on going. This is an
No,
area of interest.
I know that this topic is very close to your heart, given that it's
It is.
your research topic. So we'll get to that towards the end of the session because I do
Sure.
want to, have your expertise and your research side of things, the amount of time you've put in into it. So we'll get to that as well.
Sure.
But yes, moving on to the next one, I think we come to the third layer of what we are keen to discuss, which is the response and outcome. It's not always mandatory that if we receive a feedback from the industry that you need to replace certain thing within your training and assessment style or within the training and assessment strategy, you always have to go ahead and do it. What you can also do is that you can consider that feedback and see if that actually falls back with your learner cohort and what you're trying to achieve with the qualification. It's not always 100% that you have to just make changes blindly to make it an actionable item within your records. More important is that you've considered the feedback. You've gone back to the team. You've gone back to the table. You've seen what exactly the industry is saying. You've matched it up to your practices, and if required, you've done the change. Otherwise, if not, you've made a note why you've not actually gone ahead and made the change. Sometimes it is also possible that you may not be able to do the change straight away, given
True.
the timeline and given the stage that you're at with the qualification. So you can put an action item in your industry consultation register that you'll come back to the suggestion in 6 months' time. Once you have some more student enrollments and once you gather the post implementation data on it, as long as you have that flow of information, I think that is more than enough to show the seriousness of the process and the intent behind the process. So, coming to the next scenario, over to you.
No, that's absolutely correct, Kush, because it's about record keeping. You have to make sure that the records are appropriately kept and not necessarily actioned right there and then,
Yeah.
but then in the due course. Yeah, looking at the next scenario, consultation during assessment validation. Now, this is an area where RTOs often underutilize industry inputs. Validations are typically treated as an internal quality process, but industry consultation can add a layer that internal review can't really, real world applicability. So, yeah, I mean, it's important to, as we discussed earlier, it's important to record the findings of the validations and make sure that it is allocated and actioned on a timeline that is mutually agreed between the teams.
Yep. No, because that's another thing that, the colleges and the RTOs, they always have that question in mind. What are the points when they need to have the industry consultation done? Like, when exactly do they have to go back to the industry? So
Yeah.
sometimes I do get those answers that we completed one industry consultation at the time of adding the qualification to the scope. So we've
Yeah.
recently done it. Should we do it after 12 months? Should we do it after 6 months? And I'm like, it's not based on the timeline per se, because it will depend on many external factors. And it's a continuous dialogue between the industry and the college if you really have to keep your qualification relevant. Because if something's changing in the industry landscape, if a unit is more relevant in the industry within 6 months' time of adding the qualification on scope, it will be in the favor of the RTO to revisit and, swap the elective and bring that change within the 6 months' time rather than waiting for a 12-month cycle to come back to the industry consultation. And similarly, coming back to your point, having industry involvement within the validation cycle is so important and so underrated within the RTOs right now, because it is usually done behind the doors. It is usually done within the team of the RTO. And I've seen very less providers going back to the industry at that point. Whereas it is so important to gather that feedback time and again, especially with the qualifications which involve work placements and interaction with the industry at any given point. When we talk about childcare, aged care, any of these qualifications, it is so important to have that dialogue with the industry people on what are the skills that can be better delivered within the workplace, what can be done in simulation. So till you actually go through the validation process for the units with the industry, there's no way you can get to actionable items or any proper feedback out of it. What do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. You're absolutely correct, because it's important to that the bodies that you consult, the individuals that you're consulting, they are actively involved in an ongoing consultation basis. It shouldn't be just once in a year, or as and when required. There has to be a sustainability factor involved in it. And as you rightly mentioned, during the validation, it becomes even more important, because
Yes.
that's when you need to take insights from the industry that you can always have when you are in touch with the people you really want to consult. So yeah, that's one of the most important things, and that's what the auditors look at: how often you're consulting, what is coming out of the consultation, and what you're doing with the outcomes that you have
Yeah.
achieved.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one now, consultation after a complaint or a near miss. We have seen that whenever there is a problem, you get back to the industry and try to find out what happened and why. Okay, an RTO receives feedback, for example, from an employer that one of their graduate wasn't adequately prepared for medication administration in a disability support context. Now, this is a very classical example. You'll see this happening across the board. And yes, that is a point where the RTOs need to get back to the industry, try to find out why that happened and what they can do to make sure that the team is adequately prepared. And the inputs that you get from the industry are at that juncture are very, very important, because then it has to be translated into the curriculum and also into the assessment practices thereafter. Now, that's very important. What do you have to say?
No, definitely, Sam. I think a well-functioning system that triggers a consultation requirement, because the moment you get a complaint and the moment there's a problem on the ground, you know that there is something that has gone missed within the system. There's definitely a systematic gap. Whether it is not providing proper induction to the student prior to placing them for the work placement, or to give them the basic understanding of what is, and we're talking about we are putting the students in work placement with the actual patients and for the patient care. So it's all very, very sensitive and very serious to take that feedback and actually make changes on the ground before we actually push the students into the work placement. So, and we have seen that for some of our clients also, that whoever's taking the feedback and making changes, they're having better relationships with the work placement managers and the places they're sending the students to, because that's the whole purpose of the exercise. It needs to be a meaningful relationship between all the parties rather than a burden for one to carry on behalf of the other. So I think that's where the whole dialogue changes and the whole system changes. The moment we stop taking it like a paper exercise and start putting it as an option to make a change and a trigger to bring the change, that is where the whole mindset will shift, because then you actually have that intent to get that feedback, gather that feedback, look at the complaints more seriously. Otherwise it is taken more like a, we keep on saying that word, but it'll be taken more like a tick box exercise, that yes, we have gathered the feedback. You'll not be very keen to go through the feedback if you're not serious about it.
Absolutely. I mean, Kush, you're right. Because talking about the mindset, we don't have to forget that it's a shared value proposition. Because when we talk about shared value and reciprocal partnership agreements, that is what it's all about. Because industry consultation is definitely important to vocational training sector, but it's also equally important to the employers.
Yeah.
Because they eventually will get a pool of skilled workforce at the end of the day.
Yes.
Because coming back to the mindset, I've seen RTOs saying that why should we we've already discussed this with the industry once. We don't want to disturb them. They're already busy doing what they're doing. They may not be interested in what we're going to ask them. But it's not the case. You have to explain to the industry. You have to engage in a meaningful discussion And that'll happen only when you've got a sustainable platform, when you get in touch with them on a regular basis, and there's a dialogue which is based on the shared values.
Yeah.
So that's very important. It's a responsive mechanism at the end of the day. Well, again, moving forward, let's look at the documentation, the practice that forms the basis of industry consultation. So
yeah, I think the goal of the consultation again is not to create more paperwork, and we've covered that in our prior discussion today. It's more to create the records that actually serve the system. They actually become a trigger to bring the change within the system. And it is actually a mindset shift that is needed in the key management people who are managing the operation. Instead of having it like an exercise, instead of having it as a, gathering the document and making sure you are meeting the requirements of the standards, the mindset needs to shift to that whether are we actually the training that we are doing, is it actually making any sense for the industry? Is it useful training and assessment delivery that we are doing? Are the students that we are developing for future, are they going to actually get jobs in the future or not? If the answers and if the mindset is on making sure that the answers to these questions are in positive, I think half the battle will be won over there. Then anything that they do, whether it's any minutes of meeting, any consultation, any feedback, any informal discussion that is happening, everything is going to become meaningful after that.
No, absolutely, you're right. That is how that is the kind of mindset that the RTO owners need to focus on and train their staff on that as well, because it's important to think like that across the board. It's important that everyone, not just the CEO, but the
Yes.
training manager, compliance manager, and the entire team,
Yeah.
they're on the same page when it comes to industry consultation. Now, talking about the documentation, Kush, we recommend three layered documentation, so to speak. Layer one is about a register that you maintain, a consultation register. Layer two is a record of consultation, actually what happened during the consultation. And number three, the layer three is a response record, which is, I believe, the most important thing as a result of the consultation, what response did you take? What actions were undertaken? So getting into each one of them one by one, we'll see a lot. Let's get into it. Now, layer one, the consultation register, as we know, it's a very common document that you see across the board in every single RTO, which has the name of the organization, the contact person, the date, the role, capacity, whether they were an employer, industry body, or a professional association, the qualification or the area that was discussed. If it was a unit of competency, you probably mentioned the name of the unit of competency, any specific element discussed, and mention that. The format, whether it was a meeting, survey, interview, or email exchange for that matter, and a brief summary of what was discussed. So that's what usually goes into the register. And I've seen merely that is where most of the RTOs stop. They believe that if a consultation register is maintained, that's good enough evidence for the audit purposes. But I believe we need to get on to the second layer before we stop here, which is probably I'll leave that to you if you can talk about that. The consultation record.
The consultation record, Sam, it needs to detail record for each and every individual that was approached as part of the industry consultation feedback or any kind of suggestions or recommendations around building the training and assessment strategy systems, or even the assessment tools when we talk about it. We also need to have the record of feedback, whether the facilities and the resources that are being put to use within the RTO, they're suitable for the training and assessment design that they're aiming at. Then whether the vet workforce, the trainers and assessors that are being shortlisted, they're actually fully qualified people and they've got relevant industry experience. Many times we've seen scenarios where trainers and assessors, they hold the qualification, they hold the TA, but then within the same industry also, they're working in a different specialization. So they're not connected to the actual industry, which is relevant for the qualification and discussion. So there can be gaps on that side also. Rather than noting that industry partner discussed a certain topic or a certain area, it is more important that the records actually show that the assessment conditions in the current TAS, or, for example, if we are talking about the assessment conditions, do they reflect the typical workplace environment or not? That should be the question, that should be the record that needs to be maintained. And then we get the response from the industry people that a certain skill set is being assessed in the workplace. It can be done in simulated environment or vice versa. Like something cannot be done in a simulated environment and it should actually be completed in the workplace. For example, if it is, again, I keep going back to CHC because I think that's a very, very diversified and dynamic qualification to have very often feedback from the industry. But there are certain units that should be actually done in the workplace, even though there is no mandatory requirement to have them in the workplace. But they talk about sensitive scenarios and situations where the students should actually be liaising with the actual patient care rather than doing it with the mannequins in the simulation, because there's more to the physical handling of the process. It's more of the emotional connect and how they feel for the patient and the empathy and everything that comes across as part of that process. So it is very important to have that understanding of, what are the things that we ask the industry and how do we actually gather that feedback and bring it back to the practices that we want to develop within the art.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you picked up the right examples because I've worked in the aged care homes and I'm a pharmacist by profession, back in India. So I understand what goes into the care environment. It's important to not just simulate it, but actually get involved in the real workplaces because that's what you'll be doing at the end of the day once you get the
Exactly.
qualifications. So that's very, very vital to look at what are the units that are being simulated. In fact, such qualifications like aged care and childcare, I believe they should be delivered at the workplace at some point in time. I would probably love to see that happening moving into the future. Okay, coming back to the third layer, the response record, which in fact is very important because it closes the loop of the industry consultation. A table showing, the feedback that you received, the decision made, the action taken, the rationale for the action that was undertaken, and the date. It's important to have that. And it should be visible within the process that was influenced. So when you're recording the response of the consultation or the engagement that you had with industry, it's important to record the response, what actions were taken right there and then in a separate column, because that is where you can tie it up with what was discussed and how it actually impacted your processes or whether it did not impact the process. Even that is very important. So it's important to make sure that the response record is embedded within the industry consultation register as a third layer.
Yes. No, definitely, Sam. And I think whatever document or system is getting impacted by the industry consultation, we also need to have reflective notes within those documents, whether it is a TAS being revised as an outcome of industry consultation. We need to have the industry feedback embedded within the TAS on the basis of which the revision is happening. I've seen a recent practice where it's just given in the task that refer to the industry consultation records. There's no right or wrong answer here. Everyone can follow their own practice, but it just makes more sense to close off, the full dialogue within the task that, okay, this was the feedback that was gathered by the industry that led to the revision of the task, and this is the revision that is done. So it just becomes a better flowing document for reference if it is done properly. And same goes for the assessment tools also. If there is any change that is happening in the assessment tools as an outcome of industry consultation, that definitely needs to reflect in the version control of that tool so that it all ties back and it all becomes an integrated system rather than separate documents sitting within the folders.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you rightly mentioned, within the document, for example, the task, if you've updated the task and come up with a new version following the industry consultation, it must be clearly said in the table at the end, where you document which version is it and what was the revision made, what was a change that led to this version. So that's important to be recorded. I think we're going well. Moving to the next section, which is the most important, I believe, once again, amongst all the other important ones that we've seen, is the ownership and the accountability, because that again is failing at various levels if you look at it. So this dimension is very important because you have to, as an RTO owner, it's important to delegate the responsibility of the industry consultation and the documentation process. And if nobody owns this process, it'll be inconsistent. We've seen that during the internal audits as well. So it's vital to allocate responsibilities, to clearly define a job, within the job descriptions, who will be consulting, how the consultation will take place, of course, and who is responsible for keeping the records. So that internal ownership is very important. Yeah.
Definitely, Sam. And I think it needs to be linked to the position rather than the person. Because depending on the person would mean that if someone's got good industry contacts and if that person is doing a good industry consultation or feedback exercise, the moment that individual leaves the organization, there will be a gap in that area. So it is very important we link the accountability back to the positions within the organization so that whoever's taking up that position by default, it is given to that position rather than linking it with the people that, okay, a certain trainer has good exposure with the industry, so let them do it. It should not happen. You can still utilize the resources, you can still utilize the people that you have within the network, but it's very important you link it back and you make the positions accountable rather than the people within the organization.
Absolutely. The positions, that's a very important point, I believe. Not just about the individuals, it's about the positions that you have within the organizations. And if you don't have that position, then I believe the RTO manager or the compliance person should take the responsibility of, the governance process, the industry engagement, the decision making.
Yeah.
So in our experience, it works best with three distinct functions, so to speak, in terms of industry engagement. Function one is the process governance, typically lies with the compliance head. Function two is about industry engagement, the actual relationship and the conversation that is happening sits naturally with the trainers, with the training managers, and also with the subject matter experts. And of course, the third one is decision making. When the consultation feedback is received, who decides what to do with it? So who is actually analyzing that information and coming up with the action items that needs to be taken? So whether it's improvement in the assessment tools or whether it's a learner guide that has to be updated. So who is taking that decision? And ideally, that is done by the training manager or probably the compliance head.
Yep.
Yeah. So with these three functions clearly assigned to the positions, it's important that the consultation, the consultation stops being an individual behavior. So that's what happens when we're assigning these responsibilities and linking them to the positions. So it's not about individual behaviors, as you rightly mentioned. It starts being organization process and gets embedded within the organization culture moving forward.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think that also brings us to the next segment where we talk about linking these consultations with the continuous improvement outcomes, which I think is true for every area within the RTO. Till you're not linking up everything with self-assurance and continuous improvement, it means nothing. Because if you're not making improvements from whatever process you're following, whether it is or industry engagement, it actually will not translate into any improvement within your system. And as a result, it's not going to be a meaningful outcome for the organization. So this section, again, becomes a very important layer of what we are discussing here, because as we started, just having the consultation records, just having the feedbacks is not enough. To put them back into your continuous improvement cycle is the most crucial stage of gathering industry feedback and having industry consultation done properly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about continuous improvement at the end of the day. And when we talk about continuous improvement, we need to clearly also understand that we need to identify what are the areas that you're improving. It's not just a part of a document that has improved, but what it is leading to is also very important. Whether it is the learning outcomes that have improved, or whether it is the quality of the training that has improved,
Yeah.
or whether it is the skill set that has improved. So it's important to clearly state what is the level of improvement that you have that this consultation has resulted in. So that's again very important. Now, because consultation, if it's well done, it's probably that it's one of the most powerful inputs to the organizational development. So that's very important. So looking at the CI register entries, it's again important to clearly state, as I mentioned, what action was taken and what has improved. And what you intend to do. If the improvement hasn't really taken at that point, it's important to make a note as to what it'll lead to also.
Yeah.
That's again very important. All said and done, the CI register has to be updated every time there's a consultation that has happened. And uh, again, the documentation that is being done on the CI register should be very explicit in terms of what has happened and what it's leading to.
Yeah. And I think every piece of industry feedback that we're getting, that needs to go on the CI register with proper notes. If there is a change happening as an outcome of that feedback, that needs to be reflected in the CI register, as well as if the change is not happening. As we mentioned, not every feedback or every comment from the industry would lead to a change within the system. So if the change is not happening, it's still very important to note that and put a comment there why that change has not been triggered after receiving the feedback from the industry. That's very, very crucial, which I think gets missed by a lot of RTOs at this stage.
Absolutely. It's very important, as you mentioned, because yes, it has to be clearly explained what was the hindrance,
Yeah.
what didn't lead to the change. It's important to notify that. And also we should not miss the temporal dimension when it comes to industry consultation, which is the pattern across the year. So when you're doing a consultation, yes, you have to record as to what is happening at that point in time, but you also have to look at the preceding 12 months, because sometimes that also has an impact on what you are engaging for. So
Yeah.
that's very important. So you have to look at the preceding 12 months as a part of the review, not just the most recent conversation. So that's again very important.
Yeah, because that sort of gives a two-dimensional, view of what has happened in the past and what do you look forward in the upcoming 12 months. So that puts you in a situation to make a very informed decision of what changes are you implementing and whether your training and assessment delivery is going to be meaningful and quality driven as an outcome of the industry consultation that you're noting within the system. So that actually brings us towards the next segment about embedding the consultation into the daily workflow. And I think that again becomes a very important discussion for all our listeners, because if you're doing the consultation, but it's not embedded within your system, and there are things that you look at, at a very random plan, and there's no direction of exactly when are you doing the consultations, what are the triggers, what are the things that can lead to consultation, what are the items that you're seeking consultation on. That also is very important, because that is also sometimes very unclear within the providers. What are the things that you're seeking consultation on when it comes to training and assessment? As we've very lightly touched upon, we do talk about the training and assessment strategy, and that is probably one document every provider would take to the industry when seeking feedback. But there's so much more to training and assessment and the system around the training and assessment. We talk about the assessment tools. We talk about the trainer quality, trainer experience, trainers' relevance to the industry. Then we also talk about the facilities that are being used. We also talk about the work placement arrangements that are happening around that qualification. So there's just so much more that we need to ask the industry. If that clarity is not there in the workflow that is being built up within the RTO, then definitely we're going to miss out on very important dialogue and very important discussion that needs to happen even prior to, touching upon the qualification.
Absolutely. I mean, the consultation touch points, that's the foundational principle, I believe, because if you look at the student journey, you're practically looking at all aspects of student journey, and you're trying to improvise on every single aspect of it. And
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, you want to give the best learning experience to the learners that are enrolling with you. And the bottom line is you got to make sure that they are job ready at the end of the day. That's what the essence of vocational education training is. So it's important to, as you rightly mentioned, not just the tasks, but also look at all the different activities that happen within the RTO. And if you can get back to the industry and seek their inputs on how you can improve the important activities that you're undertaking, basically with an intent to improve the graduate job readiness, that will definitely help. Yeah, moving to the step two, that was a very important, crucial step one in terms of embedding consultation into daily workflow.
Yeah.
The second step is audit your documentation backwards. See, this is a very interesting process, and it applies to different to each other's lives as well. If you look at what you've done in the past and how you've done it, if you re-engineer it back, and then you can look at how it from where you started and what went wrong. It's easy to find out the gaps. And when you apply it into the vocational training practice, you'll see that when you go back, pick any change that you made, for example, in the tasks or the assessment tool over the past 12 months. Now, if you try to trace back and try to find out where it all started, why the consultation process was done, what came out of the consultation, what changes were made, you can actually draw a line very clearly where you'll be able to find out the documentation gap. And that is the whole essence of continuous improvement. So you probably have to track back and see how you reached a point where you are at, and then you'll be able to find out where the gaps were, or where you didn't have a stronger documentation, or where you can improve within the process. So that's again very important, because at the end of the day, these are scaffoldings that you're putting across to support the frameworks that you have got within the RTO. So
Yeah.
it's important to review your own framework as well as you go through the consultation process. What do you have to say?
No, definitely, definitely. I completely agree, Sam, because the moment you start, reflection is, I think, is the key of improvement. Because if you're not reflecting on your actions, and if you're not looking at what was it that went good or bad in the systems that you've already implemented, if that is not getting translated into your continuous improvement cycle, you're definitely up for a disaster as a business also. Forget about education. As a business overall, it doesn't make sense if you're not looking at the feedback you're getting from the learners, if you're not looking at the feedback you're getting from the industry or any other stakeholders for that matter, then that reflection becomes the key to driving the cycle forward and making changes and improvements to your future. And that needs to happen in a very organic manner within the organization rather than having it like a process, because it needs to be embedded within the culture of the organization rather than taking it as an additional step or an additional process on top of what is required.
Absolutely. And you know what I've seen is, if that is a mindset of individuals within the RTO, that they're trying to analyze, review their own tasks on a daily basis, and also talking about CI, they're going back and trying to find out where the documentation could be improved, then consultation, it stops feeling like a compliance task.
Yeah.
It becomes a part of the culture of the organization, that whenever there's a course requirement, you go back to the industry, you're actually on a regular basis, you're actively consulting with the industry. And that becomes a source of the intelligence. The organization becomes more intelligent in terms of the skill sets that the people have, the way they think. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that is what will make the difference in the end product, which is the qualified graduate, who's job ready. That's again very important.
I think it's a very, very addictive process for that matter, because the moment you start seeing the positive changes coming along the cycle based on what feedback you gathered and what you changed within the systems and how that impacted the learning outcomes or the training quality that is happening on the ground, it is so satisfying to see that just by following that cycle and following that chain, you're able to bring about the change, and we are undermining the overall impact of the changes that we do today for the future workforce and the future learners who are going out from the colleges, because it drastically impacts their employability and it drastically impacts the skill sets that they're picking up right now. It's just huge if we look at it separately.
Absolutely. And just to put it into perspective, Kush, the research that I'm conducting currently, I'll talk to you about it in a while, in just a minute. Sadly, the employer confidence in the accredited qualifications is diminishing. Look at it. It's not getting better. It is definitely either diminishing or it's just staying where it is. We want it to get better, because till the time the industry has got the confidence in the vocational training system, the skill shortages will not be addressed, and that is a huge impact on the economy of Australia, if you look at it that way. So it's important to build employer confidence, and that will happen only when the graduates are job ready.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you trace back, just as we were discussing, it's important to track back. And the graduates will be job ready only when they go through a meaningful process of training.
Yeah.
But when the curriculum is aligned to what the industry is expecting, and then the assessment practices are also the way industry expects them to be. So again, it's all interlinked. It's important to understand that concept. So yeah, I mean, to close this session, I think we've had a very interesting discussion. So to summarize this episode, I would say the consultation is not an event. In fact, it's a function. It's a very important function that every single RTO need to get into in a meaningful and a very sustainable manner. So, and it needs structure and ownership and a processful and a thorough documentation, I would say, which is clearly defined, which is linked to the positions, and which is embedded in the culture of the organization.
Yeah. No, definitely, Sam. And I think we all need to realize the industry that we are sitting in and the power that we have as part of this industry to shape the future of the workforce and, people who go out and work for us in future. So if we invest our time, energy, and skill set in a proper manner today, we're looking at a brighter future tomorrow. So that's very, very important rather than taking it as a process on paper or rather than taking it, an exercise that needs to be completed for the purpose of meeting compliance requirements. I think that mindset needs to shift, and we need to understand why industry consultation and feedback is so important for the vocational sector. Not just vocational sector, for any organization, but it's very important for the vocational sector because these two are directly linked. There's a direct link between these industry people who are looking at getting the workforce. They're ready to provide jobs, provided we are doing meaningful training delivery in today's time with the providers. So on that note, thank you so much for your time. We'll close the topic on the industry capability series, but I'm going to hold you off to get a brief on your research side of things that you're doing now that we've got you here. If you can please throw some light on, what you've been doing and what are the outcomes of, not in detail because it's taken you 5 years, I believe. So it's going to be, but in a brief manner, if you can tell us.
No, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Kush. Yes, the research is on. It's still not complete. I'm in the process of writing the thesis, data collection, and all that. But in a nutshell, I've been in this space for some time, and I always wanted to understand why the industry consultation, what improves the outcomes in the VET. So the research is primarily focused on sustainable industry engagement in vocational training. That's what research is all about. And with the focus on how the use of AI tools, the artificial intelligence tools, to analyze the industry feedback that we collect, together with the shared values reciprocity mechanisms, can strengthen the industry engagement process. Because a weak industry engagement process directly impacts a weaker curriculum, a weaker assessment validity, and in fact, graduates who are not job ready. So the research focuses on this strengthening process. It's a qualitative multi-case study approach where I'm looking at different RTOs and try to talk to different RTOs and different stakeholders to understand how they can strengthen and make the industry engagement more sustainable, and with a special focus on shared values and reciprocity mechanisms. So yeah, I'll bring it forward once it's done, and we'll have a session on that, and I'll take you through the findings. But yeah, till then, it's
I'm
interesting.
definitely looking forward to it, Sam. But do you plan to publish your papers after you're done, or no?
Sure, I
They're
will.
only
Yeah.
you will.
I have
Looking
plans to do
forward.
that. But yeah, it has
Yeah,
been a very
perfect.
interesting journey over the past 3.5 years. A lot of interesting insights, a lot of learning involved, and yeah, it's very interesting. I can't wait to bring it forward and discuss my findings with the sector leaders like yourself.
Definitely looking forward to it. And thank you so much to all our listeners for today's time. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.